Welcome to season 3 of the Healing Broken Families podcast. I'm Barbara Pointe, your host. And each week I host conversations around divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict personalities. If you like our content and you're listening today, like and subscribe and give us some love. It keeps me going. Thank you to Fuji Water for sponsoring today. And I'm very delighted that today my guest is Martin Salama, and he is known as the architect of the Warrior's Life Code. He specializes in helping people who are frustrated quickly turn their life around and shift their mindset to uncover their greatness so they can live in their true potential and do what we all want to do, enjoy our lives. Welcome, Martin.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I am too. Really nice to chat with you, and I'm looking forward to finding out exactly what the life code means.
Should I tell you now?
Mm-hmm.
All right, sure. So for me, everything revolves around the word life. And that came as part of the ups and downs that I was going through in my life at the time. And I was on and up and I was loving where I was. And I said, I love what I'm doing and I want to show other people how to enjoy their lives as well. I sat down for about 2 hours and out of it came the acronym LIFE, which stands for Live Incredibly Full Every Day.
You know what? I love it because really honestly, it's been a rough road the last couple of years for many, many people. And sometimes we're walking around with our cup half empty and not full, and we're frustrated, like and we're not happy.
Yeah.
So, okay, so how does this acronym that you created crossover interject with folks with human beings?
Okay. Well, it's not as if I woke up one day and said, oh, I'm having a wonderful life. My whole life has been beautiful. Never had any adversities in my life. And I'm going to create this. I had many ups and downs, many adversities in my life. And I had gotten to the point after the last bunch of them that I was finally understanding that I can control how I'm feeling about these ups and downs. And instead of it being like a roller coaster ride, they could be more like a wave. Right? It's how I'm controlling myself that helps to control whatever the issue is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds really good because we all have adversities and, and then we're responding. So when you got to life being more like a wave, maybe tell us how you.
So I got there?
Yeah.
All right. That'll help. Let me tell you a little bit about my story. So I'll start when I was young because I had a childhood trauma that affected me for the next 40 years. So when I was 10 years old, I had something that affected me till I was almost 50 years old, 45 to, 45 to 50 years old. So I was 10 years old and I had a tragedy in my life. I lost my 5-year-old brother, Michael, to a school bus accident. And I was the first of a boy after four older sisters. So there was me and then my brother Michael, who was 5 years younger than me. And for me, I was so excited when he came along because I was like, wow, now I've got that partner. I've got that guy that's going to be with me for the rest of our lives. And we're going to conquer the world together. And on that day, it all went away. But even more so on a deeper level, my parents were distraught. They lost their baby, and nobody ever should feel that kind of a pain, ever, losing of a child. So the 10-year-old in me said, I've got to make sure that my parents never feel that kind of pain or any kind of pain because they've just gone through this horrific tragedy. So in my mind, this is a 10-year-old talking, saying, I've got to make sure that my parents are always happy. So 40 years later, I was able to look back at that moment and say, that is when I became a people pleaser. Because it became my job to make sure my parents were happy. And as an extension, I was trying to make everybody happy.
Wow, that makes so much sense. So what a profound insight you had to just pinpoint it to that moment in your life.
Yeah. Well, it came with many years of ups and downs in my life, with not understanding where it was coming from, the feelings I was having, my disharmony within myself, as it were.
Mhm.
Okay. I got married, and I was trying to please my wife, and I was trying to please my parents. And I was basically spinning these plates, and I was getting exhausted trying to make everybody happy. And I didn't even realize I was rationalized that I was doing it all for the greater good. Right. But at the end of the day, not only was I not making anybody else happy, I wasn't even making myself happy. So it was like a lose, lose, lose. And in that introspective time, which came when I was in my late 40s and 50s, I came to realize that the word rationalize is really two words. Okay. To me, you take the word rationalize, and it's two words: rational lies. Okay. Because when you break it down, rationalize, and I'm going to read this to you. I have a card deck that I just came out with, which we'll talk about, I guess. Whenever you think you may be doing something that goes against your values, you will rationalize all the reasons why it's okay. What you're really doing is lying to yourself that it's rational to think that. They are nothing more than rational lies.
That's so fascinating to me. That's really, I love the cards.
Thank you. Thank you.
I haven't thought about this very much, but I always kind of somehow end up syncing up with my guests before they come on. It just always happens. Why I love doing this podcast. And before I went to bed last night, I was watching this woman, and she was talking about a specific topic, but she was saying, stop rationalizing the irrational or something like that. And I just thought, what is she talking about? But it was really interesting. She was actually talking about just something totally unrelated, but that is so powerful what you're saying.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's interesting that now I look at things, and at the time it's a reason. Oh, well, you make it a reason. But as time goes on, you recognize that it's really an excuse in disguise, which I term as being a rational lie. That you're saying that it's rational to do something that goes against your inner values. And you're giving yourself permission to go against it by saying, okay, it's because this and this and this. But really, it's just a rational lie. For example, here's a very simple example. You wake up in the morning, you go, oh, I'm too tired to work out today. I'm too tired to exercise. And you say, well, I was good. I exercised yesterday. I ate well, so it's okay. But you know that if you exercise, within 10 minutes of starting the exercise, you'll say, oh man, I'm so glad I did this. But now, when you say that to yourself, you can now say, now that you have this awareness of the word rational lie, you could say, am I telling myself rational lies? Am I giving myself permission to make up an excuse so that I don't have to exercise? Now, if you're really too tired, okay, that's a decision, but at least you're making the decision with a little more awareness.
No, awareness is the key. So just really having honest dialogue with yourself. Because if you are telling yourself, like what you're saying, a rational lie, you are feeling on some level conflict within yourself.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly right. So that's part of my course, part of what I do as a life coach. As you said, I'm the architect of the Warriors Life Code, and that's what I coach my clients around. So how did I get to life, right? How did I get to the word live incredibly full every day? So let's fast forward to 40 years, 35 years later, 40 years later. It's about 35 years. And my wife and I are working on a project to build a multi-million-dollar health club and tennis center in New Jersey. Okay? And it took us 5 years to get there, from like 2003 until about 2008, because there's so many hoops that you have to go through. And it started out because I just closed a business, and my wife turns to me and she says, I just started taking tennis lessons and I can never find court time. There's not enough courts in the area. Maybe you want to look into doing that as a business. Now, I'm not an athlete. I don't play tennis. I'm not an athlete. Well, okay. Deep down inside, there's a part of me that's saying, well, I want to make my wife happy. It's the people pleaser again. So we start this road. Now, I'm going to be honest, it's not her. It was me saying yes when I could have said no. Okay, so I'm taking responsibility for that. So now we go on this 5-year journey to start doing this. And by the time we finally get all the approvals from the city and the state and everything else that came in between, I'm over $3 million into this project. Okay. Now, if it was 2006 or 2007 when we got all the approvals and we went to the bank was like, here, you can have as much money as you need. Great. But for my luck and fate would have it that it would be the summer of 2008. And I go to the bank and they're like, yeah, we're not lending right now. Things are slowing down. The mortgages, the lending is slowing down. Everything's happening. We don't know where it's going to go. A month later, the house of cards falls when Bernie Madoff comes out and says, yeah, I screwed up. And billions and billions of dollars. And then all of a sudden, it's like a house of cards. The subprime loans, everything falls apart. And overnight, we're in a recession. And I was one of the victims of that recession. In terms of financially, I had put all my whole pot into the center of this poker game of business, saying, okay, when I get the approval, I'll get my money back. I'll be able to start the project. It's a $15 million project, so on and so forth. Nope. Just like that, the other guy turned over. He had a royal flush. I was out.
Oh my word. Wow. How did you make it through that without,
Without killing myself.
like a warrior?
I worried for about a year. I was depressed. I couldn't sleep. Eventually, I started taking, getting some therapy and some coaching. And about a year later, I came to the understanding, okay, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I had been a businessman since I was 10 years old. I was always in businesses. And a lot of that happened to be tied into my wanting to please my father and do what my parents thought was best for me. Even though I didn't think so, I was like, okay, well, you know best. I want to make sure you're happy. Back to the people pleaser, right? Mm-hmm. So I looked at myself and I said, okay, I got to reinvent myself. I'm tired of being in these up and down roller coaster businesses that I've been in my whole life. What do I want to do? And I thought about it and I realized the times I was happiest was when I was involved in community events. I was a leader, fundraisers and stuff like that. And as a leader, people come in and say, I don't know how much time I can give. I don't know what I can do for you. And I would talk them through it and really cheerlead them and show them their potential. And I looked at it, I was like, wait a minute. I am a coach. Now let me go get the training to be a coach, be a life coach.
So you went and got the training then to become a life coach?
So I decided that that's what I'm going to do. And along the way, about 2 months before it was time for the coaching school to start, it was my 24th wedding anniversary, which happens to fall out on the day after Valentine's Day. Pretty romantic time, right?
Yes.
And my wife says, I'm done. I want a divorce. I was 10. So here I am. I'm back down again. Why does everything happen to me? Just as I'm trying to get my life back together again, this happens. Now, I have to say, I recognize now. Sorry?
I just want to say that often people feel that way. Why does this keep happening to me?
Yeah.
It's really impactful what you just said, because that is a human condition or a human emotion that often people feel that way.
Yeah.
And it is...
you fall into the victim mode.
It is. I was going to say it is a victim mindset. So thanks for sharing that, Martin.
Yeah, which I was able to change over my life. And now I say things happen through me.
Oh, I like that. Things happen through me. It's definitely a better feeling thought. I felt like instantly better when you said that.
Thank you. Thank you. So I was like, okay, now what am I going to do? I said, you know what? I'm still going to go through the life coaching. And I think God was sending me a message at that time saying, oh, you want to be a life coach? Well, make sure that you really get to go in there and work on yourself. And that first weekend, they said, before you can become a coach, and we'll start teaching you this weekend, but let's go deep into yourself and say, and recognize you don't have to stay who you think you have to be. You could be who you want to be, not who you think you have to be. Like, okay. And beforehand, they gave us some books to read, and they said, pick a couple of these books on the list and read them. And one of them is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. You know that book, huh?
Yeah, I love that book, but often I forget one of the agreements. But look, can we review them really quick because they're so fantastic?
Absolutely. So it's right there on my bookshelf, The Four Agreements. And the four agreements are: be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. And for me, that second agreement of don't take anything personally, it was as if he had just given me a secret that people had been telling me my entire life. But until that moment, I wasn't ready to hear it. It's the old, the the master will appear when the student is ready. So I was ready. I was down. I was like, I got to figure out what's going on. Because I was taking all the blame for the marriage, for the failure of the marriage. And it was time for me to go through this and through therapy and through coaching. Therapy started me, but coaching got me through it even more, to recognize I'm not at fault for the entire marriage. I'm at fault for some of it. She's at fault for some of it. I'm a victim. She's a victim. Now it's about recognizing what can I own and what can I change? Not for her, not for my children, but for me.
Powerful. Very powerful. I mean, that in itself is quite a shift. And, when I read that book, and even today, I try to live by that one code: don't take things personally. And it's freed up so much energy. And I find it interesting that that one really seemed to resonate with you as well.
Yeah.
So, is there a connection between, like, first of all, it doesn't matter, but don't take things personally is a really powerful agreement or covenant.
Yeah.
Does it have a relation to being a people pleaser?
To me, absolutely. I absolutely believe it is. And here's why. As a people pleaser, for me, these are the things that showed up in my life I can look back now and recognize. Number one, I was a control freak. Number two, I would take things personally because if people were not felt like I wasn't pleasing, if I wasn't being the people pleaser, I felt like they were attacking me. Right? Number three, I had a very short temper. And number four, as a people pleaser, I was always looking for the recognition, the acknowledgement, and the validation for what I was doing. Wow, Martin, you did that. That's fantastic. You're the king of the world. That's what I wanted. I wanted everybody to shout my name and say, wow, look at this guy. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So to me, I definitely think taking it personally and a people pleaser, to me, are intertwined.
That's really, really interesting because I spent much of my life as a people pleaser as well before, lots of my life, and also being codependent is intertwined with being a
Yes.
people pleaser.
Yes.
And I'll just throw one more interesting thing out there. Even if you were to have, say, a parent that was acting, let's just say it, abusive, it's actually not even personal for that child, because if any child were to be born to that parent, would still have been abused. So even something at that level is not personal. That's
Right.
going quite deep, but you can run a long way with that. Don't take things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up about being codependent, because what I recognized was, and this is another book from Don Miguel Ruiz called The Mastery of Love, where he talks about that every relationship you have should be 50-50. Okay? That doesn't mean you're not giving you 100%. That means you're both equally giving to the relationship, not just romantic relationships. If you have a friendship and you're doing more than the other, and they're always taking and you're always giving, that's not a good relationship. Okay? So what I realized, and when I finished, just so to before I got there, when I finished coaching, I was originally a divorce recovery coach, and I wrote a book called Recovering from Divorce.
Really? I did not know this. Well, this is perfect for our audience, Martin.
I know. That's why I bring it up. Here it is. You can still get it on Amazon. It's still available there on Amazon, Recovering from Divorce. And I talk about this in my book. What I came to realize is that my relationship with my wife was never 50-50. I loved her more than she loved me. Okay. And as a result, now I'm going to say this is on a subconscious or unconscious level. The one that loves less has all the control in the relationship, because the one that loves more is trying to get them to love them as much. So as a result, they'll go out of their way to do things to be in a codependent relationship. Right?
Yes.
So looking back now, telling me I want a divorce, other than my 4 children, was probably the best gift she's ever given me.
That's incredible when you can be grateful for it.
Yeah, well, I would love to say I was the next day, but so it wasn't.
I can tell you've gone on quite a journey. And by the way, I'll be putting that book in our show notes because that looks excellent.
Thank
I mean,
you.
divorce is such an invitation to explore like codependency and people pleasing and why we're not happy and all of these things. So
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so that's who I became. And then I was a life coach for a few years, coaching people around divorce. Because to me, you look at the statistics, 2/3 of second marriage end in divorce. And to me, there's an obvious correlation as to why. Because if you end a relationship and you say it's 100% their fault, tomorrow you're going to marry somebody exactly like that person in a different body. Even, and I say this with love and care, even if you are an abused person. Because if you don't figure out why you attract that type of a person, you'll keep attracting that type of a person. I've had clients who I turned to and I said, I can tell that you were abused at least verbally since you were a child. And she said, yes, I was. And I was physically abused from my father and my first 2 husbands. So my first thing to her was, you're not allowed to date until I give you permission.
did she agree?
You did.
So you could actually tell that about her.
Well, I use an assessment that I get from my school that helps to understand a person's attitudes. Okay. And that it doesn't tell me everything. But then when I work with her, knowing these scores and how it's affecting her, and I ask the questions that draw out more information as a coach, then I can say, look, this is what I see. And if I'm wrong, tell me. And she says, oh, I felt physical. I said I wanted to say you're physically abused, but I held back, just said, were you verbally abused? And she said, yes, then I was physically abused. But that comes from the intuition as being a coach.
Right. Whoa. Well, I like the way you highlighted that coaches do a lot of inner work, and it is a partnership with our clients. And intuition is definitely not excluded from the conversation.
No.
And that's so cool. So I'm going to ask you a really tough question. We
Okay.
started off talking about people pleasing. And when you were talking about your client and that you could sense that she was abused, it's funny because I don't think sometimes we are so hardwired for a certain condition. It's just been part of our lives for so long. It's practically living in ourselves.
Uh-huh.
Like, what do you do in situations like that where you've been people pleasing for 40 years and some people have been abused for 40 years or been codependent for so long? It's almost part of all of their internal systems.
Right. Right.
How can coaching change that?
Well, there are some cases where you need to turn to the person and say, now that we revealed this, maybe you need to have some therapy, because therapy has a different connotation than coaching. I learned from my coaching school, and it's something I say all the time. Therapy takes a person from dysfunctional to functional. Coaching takes a person from functional to optimal.
Wow.
Right? So I've had clients who I've worked with who after a while I say, you know what, I can't work with you. You need therapy because you're not breaking down those barriers that I am not trained to help you break down. Come back to me when you have, and I'll help you move forward. But you need to come into the present before you can look into the future.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one of the big things that we were going to talk about today, Martin, was mindset.
Yep.
And so I invite you to share with us what you know about mindset as a coach.
All right, cool. So I started off earlier talking about how I came up with the word life, right? About so what had happened is that a few years after coaching, going out there and being a coach, I looked in the mirror one day and it was the heaviest I ever was in my life. And I was like, how the heck did I get here? Well, what happened is because I lost everything, I needed to go out and find a job because the coaching wasn't enough to pay my bills. So I went out there and I started to realize that I couldn't afford to be coached. So I stopped being coached, even though I was coaching. So that day when I looked in the mirror and I said, wow, how did I get to be this big? How did I let myself get this way? The answer was right there. I let myself get there because I was making bad decisions. And it started by saying I can't afford to be coached instead of saying, how can I afford to be coached? Because it's not a cost, it's an investment. So I started working out with videos, being coached on a video by somebody. And a friend of mine was coaching me on the side as well about the videos. And then I started eating better and reading better and finding ways to pay for coaches because I recognized that it was beautiful, helpful. And after 9 months, I lost 65 pounds. And in that time, I went from self-conscious to self-aware, which is the beginning of the mindset shift.
Wow. And so what did you notice when you made that shift?
I noticed, and this is another card in my deck because I feel very strongly about those two words, self-conscious and self-aware. I noticed that there's a difference. Self-conscious comes from a place of negative energy, guilt, conflict, and doubt. Self-conscious is more outward directed. It's being more concerned about what others are thinking of you and how the situation is going to affect you. You probably react to uncomfortable situations instead of respond. Now, self-aware comes from a place of positive energy, acceptance, contentment, and self-assuredness. Self-awareness is more inward-facing. You have an accurate and realistic understanding of how you are responding to situations and how you feel about things. So to me, I show people how to respond instead of react, how to be self-aware instead of self-conscious. And I help people who always react go from confrontations to conversations.
Wow, that is quite a shift to go from a confrontation to a conversation.
Right, because the confrontation's happening because they're taking it personally.
We're back to that. That's awesome.
It's all interconnected.
Yes, yeah, we can little more neutral.
Right. So after being like this for a few years, I was even doing things like meditating. Now, I'm ADHD. So could you imagine an ADHD guy meditating, even with a guided meditation for 10 minutes? When is this going to be over? How do I get my mind to sit still? It doesn't happen for me. One day I was doing it and I had this download of information that I loved my life. And that's where I wrote for 2 hours and came up with live incredibly full every day because I loved everything I was doing. And now I started out going out dating. And when I was dating, I was talking to the women about what their values were without them knowing that that's what I was doing. Because I learned in coaching that the values are the foundation of your life, your values. And one day I met a woman whose values were so well aligned with me. We went out again. We went out again. We went out again. About a month into it, I said to myself, there's something here. I got to tell her. I said, listen, I got to tell you something. And I don't need to hear it from you, but I want to tell it to you. I'm falling in love with you because I see who you are and you see me as I am and you're not trying to change me.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I can happily say we've been married for almost 5 years.
No. I love that story.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you so much.
incredible. And you know what? You really hit on something so important. If our values are not in alignment with our partner, that makes it really hard to have a relationship with them.
Yeah, it could take you down the road of codependency.
Right. Right.
There's so many things you could do. Not that your values should be exactly aligned, but they should be well aligned.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Otherwise, you're compromising yourself. People pleasing. Now I call myself a recovering people pleaser.
That's really powerful because there's a lot of people pleasers out there, and it's very, very disempowering. So I just figured out the most wonderful way for us to bring this podcast conversation, which I've really enjoyed, to a close. If you're in agreement, I would love to invite you to share with us maybe your one or two of your top personal values.
Okay, absolutely.
Sure.
So I would say my top values are family, communication, honesty, and authenticity.
Wow. Beautiful. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing, Martin. I want to acknowledge you because you're pretty special.
Oh, thank you. You are too, Barbara.
Thanks. I would love to know how anyone listening could connect with you for coaching, order your cards, order your book.
Thank
What's
you.
the best way to
Absolutely.
reach you? Okay.
So the best way to reach me, I've created this website called connectwithmartin.com. Right? So simple, right? You go there, you could buy my card deck. You could buy my next book. I don't have a link for this book. I have to get that link up there, but you could go to Amazon and get the other book. You can connect with me. You can get free gifts. Like, for example, I have a coloring book on there for adults and for children. On the 7 tips you must teach your children and yourself to have an abundant warrior mindset.
That sounds amazing. I am going to make the commitment to put all of those links in the show notes. I think the cards sound wonderful, and I know, you know what, coloring just kind of relaxes us and opens us up. Abundance, first book, all sounds amazing. So we'll put all of those in, and I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Reach out to Martin, check out his cards, and if you like this podcast, don't be shy about giving us a 5-star review. That would be incredible. And wishing everyone a beautiful day, healing, peace, enlightenment, more consciousness, more awareness, and live life.
Live incredibly full every day.
Live incredibly full every day. Thank you.
These clouds create the purest rain on earth. It falls on a remote tropical island in search of nature's best filter. Ancient volcanic rock. It's not just water, it's Fiji water.